Okay, the following morning, these have been drying all night in a damp cupboard so that they dry slowly, and so they should be still pretty soft. So I can move the rim a little bit. I put it back on this is my trimming wheel, so it's not the wheel I threw it on, but I'm just lowering the rim a little bit. Because the rim lifts up because it's drying on both sides, so it dries a lot faster than it does in the center of the piece. And that's always a bit of a problem because you could get cracking too if you let the rim dry too fast. So I often put a piece of cling film over the rim, although in this instance I'm going to be decorating the rim, so I'm going to be wetting it down a little bit just with slips. And it must be dry a little bit more on one side of the rim than the other because it's easier to get to go lower on one side than the other side. But you just have to kind of hit that little high spot with your finger as you're pushing down. And if you're not careful and you use clay with a lot of grip, this can actually split the rim sometimes, in which case you should try moistening the rim a little bit, but I'm trying to dry them out rather than get them wetter. But that looks pretty flat now. But that little bump in it is where it's a bit stiffer on the one edge and it doesn't want to go down. So you can just work with it a little bit and it'll go slowly. And then don't make sure you didn't put a little sharp edge on the rim. Now, I just recently got a question from somebody. These are a little soft at the moment, so I've got to be very careful not to put too much wet because it's just, you can so move it, and this rim will collapse if we're not careful. You put your paper stencils down first in the color that the clay is, which is brown. Obviously in this case it's the red earthenware, called Red Moist number 20 from Laguna, and you just place them wet. So when you put the paper down, it's already wet. So all I literally do is I've got a little pot of water here, I've got a stencil, I dip it in water, and I just hold it for a few seconds while it absorbs some water, because it wrinkles if you put it down dry, and then you simply place it where you want it to go. And no wrinkles appear. If you put it down dry, then wet it, wrinkles appear. So, so it's a matter of just making sure that the clay isn't too wet, because it'll collapse if there's the water that's in the paper will soak into the clay and make the clay even softer and collapse. So I just put paper stencils down, and I'm going to have brown houses around the whole platter edge. Okay, this paintbrush is sort of softish, so it's got no stiff hairs on it. It's not got much water in it because I don't want to add water to the piece, and I brush from the center of the stencil to the edge. If you go from the edge to the center, you will simply lift up the edge of the stencil and crinkle it and crease it. And this pushes any ripples or little creases you've got in the paper away from the center towards the outside edge, and it will usually even out and smooth out. Now here's the first thing that, when you're doing stenciling with layers, you have to make sure that nothing looks like it's floating, because birds fly, they can be put anywhere you want. A cat jumping kind of thing could be put anywhere you want, really, because it's not attached to the ground. But if anything that's actually attached to the ground in reality needs to be on the same plane of the other things that it will overlap. So in other words, I've got brown houses here, and I've put trees on, and I'm kind of visually imagining a circle going around here that attaches the tree to the house on the same plane, so that when I put it down and stencil it in and then put another thing behind over the top, like another paper stencil will go over, that one stuck to the brush and lifted up. But basically I try to make sure that everything looks like it's solidly firm on the ground. I decided before I spray the black for the roofs, I'm going to put some little brown cows on these pieces. And once again, they're going to be in front of they're not overlapping the houses, so I'm placing their feet lower down than the actual houses, and they'll be in the foreground. If they were overlapping the house, I'd have to put the feet higher up or level with the house. These cows are very difficult stencils to cut because they've got legs and thin, and they often tear when I'm cutting them. But I'll do 3 cows here, maybe have 3 black cows over there, and then I'll do some sheep in the other areas. Okay, now this is gone matte. It's no longer shiny, except for in the bottom area there, which I won't be stenciling, but the rim itself is dried out a little bit so that it's still movable, but it's actually, the surface of the black has gone matte. So now I'm just putting roofs on. It's the same principle. You dip the piece, shake it for a couple of seconds. When it's not dripping anymore, you place it down as accurately as you can over the previous stencil. You can paint in a little bit if you get it wrong, using black after the piece is fully stenciled, but you get it as close as possible because that saves time. So shake the paper, you can see the water dripping off. Put it down right over the top, and you can move it in the first second or two, but once it's down, you've got to leave it. The water soaks in, so you can only move it for about the first second. Put it down, and then I just kind of push over just a touch. You can see it line up. And then choosing there, I'm going to have some black cows. I have brown cows on these over this side here, so I'm going to put some black over here. And I don't want them to overlap the previous stencil, otherwise it would look like the cow was being crushed by the house. See, that cow is just finishing before the corner of the house. Now that cow is quite big and it's level with the bottom of the house, so it looks like a pretty big cow. You've got to be careful of things like that too, the proportions. Now this is the peacock green, I call it, and I think if I remember right, this is Mason Stain 6266, and I just sprayed it fairly heavy for the green pine trees and hedgerows, and now the platter is less soft than it was before, but it's still very movable. So you really, have to judge this, and there's no way I can explain exactly. You just have to get a feel for it, because if you spray too much, the thing will collapse. So I wait until the piece is not movable, and then I actually spray a layer on. And the rim firms up pretty quickly within an hour and a half, 2 hours, depending on the humidity, maybe 3 hours if it's in Mississippi. But anyway, you just need to make sure that the rim isn't too soft when you spray the next layer. The green is now, you can touch it without it leaving a fingerprint. Down there it's a little stickier, but up here, so I can't let it get too dry before putting the next layer on, because each layer must be applied when the slip underneath is still moist a little bit. So I've got green trees to put on here, and I have an assortment. I just showed you how I cut them, but these are all my different shapes of trees. I can decide, depending on the tallest piece that's on there already, well, the highest in the plane, I should say, is that. You can just see, if you can see it, there's a cow there. So nothing can go below that, otherwise it will make it look like the cow is floating. So I will place the bottom of say a tree just above the feet of the cow, and then it will look like the cow is, standing on the ground. If you don't quite understand that, you just have to make a piece, and then when you see the result of a floating animal, you'll know what I mean. But it's basically this long hedgerow, when I put it on, cannot go lower than that cow, so I will place it overlapping the cow and going up over there. And so all the things in front of that stencil now that are already being applied on the clay will look like they're sitting on the ground. The bottom of that tree is there, so I can place this tree, if it overlaps that stencil, anywhere I want, as long as the bottom of that tree doesn't look like it's going further down than the bottom of the tree that's already down. So I couldn't say, for instance, put this tree on because it's so tall, and if it finishes lower down than the bottom of that tree that's just there, it will make it look like, and also there's a house there, so it would make it look like the house was floating like a Christmas tree ornament. And watch for wrinkles when you're putting these down. So if you see anything like in that one there, then you'd have to smooth it out instantly. And I'm going to spray blue and green after I put these down. Blue for the sky. And there's the bottom of the house just there, so I'm going to do the hedgerow again. I also have a different stencil with pine trees on it here, so we can try this one. And they're very easy to bend, these stencils, so you can actually put a crease over there overlapping the other house, because nobody will see that since the stencil has already got a stencil underneath it. Center out, and that's it. So now I'm going to spray blue on the rim, and then sage green. It's actually called Celeste green when I buy the stain from Mason Stain Company, in the center area there, and I'll decide whether I can actually trim out back to brown or leave it green in the center. Okay, so now I've got stenciling done and everything. This is the one that's different because here the sky will be in the center and the grass will be around the outside edge. But I'm now just going to spray the background colors. So I just airbrushed the whole piece with sage green, which I know is called Celeste green from Mason Stain, and bright blue, which I think is 6313 from Mason Stain. So that gives me a kind of light blue sky with the sage green everywhere around the center of the piece, and I now have to let this dry for at least 24 hours in a damp cupboard so it dries slowly until everything goes a sort of matte, and you can touch it without anything sticking to your finger. And it's hard because I have to judge it carefully, which is why I do it slow in a damp cupboard, so no drafts. And sometime tomorrow I will cut through, I'll wire it through, and start removing the stencils. Okay, I'm about to cut through the actual ladder using this harp, which I've talked about in other videos. And I always rotate the platter as I'm cutting through, so I don't actually risk cutting or breaking the harp, because it's just a thin guitar strip, and then when you've got all this all go through. Okay, I'm going to now stencil remove them. They are still a little movable on the rim, but they're stiff. So I wouldn't force it because it could crack, but it's still movable a little bit. And this mug is dated 1994, that I've got there. So this mug was made 30 years ago. I'm still using it. It's got a couple of tiny chips on the bottom. And that was fired to cone 4 when I used to use a stoneware clay to do these, but the color's a lot duller, so that's why I didn't continue doing that. So the first thing I have to do is remove the green trees. I use the Lazy Susan underneath. It makes it easy to move things around when you're doing detail painting. This is one of the ones you get from the dollar store. What do you call a dollar store in the UK? Pound store, I guess. So just with a tiny little pin, it's just an X-Acto blade inside this little lump of wood. And it lifts the pieces, and sometimes it'll catch and then maybe tear, but if you're careful you can generally pull a piece off in one go. Now, the trees may be overlapping windows, but I don't think so, so I'm going to try and remove the brown trees too. If they're overlapping something, I generally not remove them. I don't want to remove anything that overlaps the houses, basically. The windows of the houses is what I'm talking, because I'm going to be painting those in. It's cold out today. We've got a high of +3 centigrade, and then tonight it's going to be quite cold. Tomorrow is a high of 0, so we finally hit winter, and it's still fall. Okay, so now there are no windows in the roofs, so I'm going to remove the roofs because they shouldn't interfere with any painting. So let's just take those off. Some of the houses did not have a separate roof, so I've got to watch that carefully. So I'm going to be painting windows and doors in, and also painting some sheep in the actual field areas. Okay, so that's everything that I think I can remove. And this is just the smallest of all the plates that I put together. So now I'm just going to get yellow. I'm painting the windows. So I've got just a little pot of yellow slip. This is I'll put the recipe in the video. It's just a cone 4, no, I think it's 04 to cone 4 slip. It doesn't go above cone 4, otherwise it bubbles. I don't have to be accurate because there's a piece of paper there, but you need a shiny light so you can see what you're doing. I think there's a door there and a window here. Sometimes I leave one of the stencils that I'm using out so I can see what it looks like when I'm painting. And the slip, you better be very careful it doesn't drip down onto the piece, obviously. But you can thicken it by adding a little bit of vinegar to it if it's just a little bit runny. And of course you can add water if it's too thick. There might be 4 windows in that one, so I'm going to paint 2 more up there. And I know there's just 1 window in this piece. I think it's just here. You can paint them in afterwards, it just takes longer afterwards. I haven't made this type of design for a whole year, I think, or maybe more. But I actually sold out of the pieces I had made in the gallery over the summer, so I decided I would, even though I thought I would not make it again, I decided in the last week I think I might quite like to sit quietly in my studio and just paint. So I decided to do some. It's very relaxing. I'm just guessing there might be a window, there may not be, and I think there is one up in that little area there. So that's why it's a good idea to save your, or take pictures of the stencils. And then black, that's better. I don't even have to be careful, you see, I just did that because there was a lot of liquid on the brush. I'm going to try thickening this, this black. Okay, so now I need a brush for the white that has a sort of cloud, will make a mark like a little fluffy cloud that's landed down on there, because that's what a sheep is, with a few legs basically. Let's get my white and see how thick that is. I just thickened the black, so it should be better as soon as the vinegar you add into it will thicken over a couple of seconds, yeah, maybe a minute. But you just add it and keep stirring while it's thickening. Well, let's take the cows off, because that won't hurt. So we've got 3 black cows. I should be able to see the horses since I can see the cows. Yeah, now I think this one probably doesn't have any horses on, because I don't see any other edges. Sometimes you think you've got one and you can actually make a very gentle poke if you've got a really sharp blade, and you can feel paper underneath the mark. Nope, there's nothing here. And then when I pull it out, I just push that piece of clay back down, because it just makes them, if I go in directly, you don't have anything, but if you go like that, and you can feel the thickness of the paper, it's very subtle, but you can do it, and but then you could just pull it out and press the clay back down, it will stay. Okay, so we're going to be able to put sheep on then, anywhere there aren't cows. So let's go paint some clouds. Okay, I think we got enough sheep. Now I'm going to set this aside for about 15 to 20 minutes until the slip has actually sort of gone dry. And then I will come back and stencil remove this so you can see what it looks like. Okay, this is another one, plate rather than platter, and I'll put it on stop motion. This one might have horses on it. So this has been sitting drying for about 15, 20, 25 minutes, something like that. So the black is the one that was wettest, so I was just waiting for that to actually get dry. Oh, I forgot a window just there, so I have to hand paint that one in. I'm going to paint the window in there again. It's a lot to remember, so there's always little things that you have to repaint. That stencil didn't want to come off in one piece. Okay, so we have all those. So now I just go back and I've got my black. I can paint any areas of the roof line that look like they need. There's a little bit of green showing through there. I could paint the windows black. Looks like I've got to carve a little bit out there when it gets a bit firmer. But the only thing that I really have to do is get some yellow in that window area there. And there was a little black window too that I'd forgotten. And I can sometimes, if I want to, paint a couple of little tiny slits down the black area. It's all about, what do you think, how much time? There's a piece of paper there I forgot. How much time do you want in a piece as far as pricing? And then the actual sheep, I might be able to use this big paintbrush, but I often just have a little tiny brush I usually use for the sheep faces and legs. But this has a reasonably nice point on it. Just make sure there's no hairs. Yeah, this is a bit big to do this little detail work. Stick sheep. It's L.S. Lowry sheep. Now I know I saw a piece of paper in here, so I've got to locate, there it is. I've left one piece of paper on there. Alright, I have seen these pieces on eBay, so if you want one of the older pieces like this, if you just have to search on eBay, I think there are some there. Well, there were, I don't know if they're still there. And so that is kind of just got to wait for it to be trimmed now. Sometimes I paint little belted Galloway stripes on the cows. That's not that hard to do if the slip is going to behave. Because you just have to paint a little we call them Oreo cows. I just kind of felt like working on some kind of peaceful pieces where I could just sit in front of the window and paint. So it was, making a certain amount of money today isn't the big deal for the day's work. Right, so we've got some Oreo cows there now. I still have to paint the windows in, the little mullions I think they're called in the windows. And I'll probably put some cherries on the trees too. I'm using Duncan, which are no longer in existence. I think Mako bought these out, but I'm using these type of underglazes that can be applied to greenware or bisque. And this is just for the apples on the trees, so find me one of the apple trees or cherry trees. Now, when I first started doing this design, look how simple it was. There was no mullions in the windows, no black roofs, they were just brown houses, silhouettes, and brown trees sprayed the background. So these were fairly fast to make. And then I started doing more and more detail, and I think I ruined it for myself because I made them so complicated and so detailed they were no longer profitable to do. Now for trimming, I have one of these, basically it's a bat, wooden bat with a rubber yoga mat over the top, and it was stuck down, but it's been gradually coming loose over the years, so I should get a new bat. But it seems to be sticking on here, it never flies off, until it did. But anyway, so I just turned my platter upside down, which I have here. It's been drying now for a couple days, just about, maybe 2.5, and so it will release from the bat, and it stands up like that. And I'm gonna just get this out of the way and then turn it upside down. And this is why I make an undercut on my platters and my plates, so I can dig my fingernails in like that and hold the platter upside down without putting any stress on the rims. If you put your fingers under the rim, obviously you've got to pull your fingers out, and if you've got a decorative surface, it would damage it. So anyway, that's how I turn them upside down. And let's see if it's centered. Oh, I better turn this on. Oh, pretty close. I used to have black circles drawn on this so I could instantly center, but they've worn off a little bit, but it's pretty easy. Alright, so platter doesn't need to be trimmed very much. I don't even put much pressure on pushing the platter down onto the bat, because it's sort of weight of itself. These platters are about 5 pounds, I think. So I just dig in a little deeper, not too much, because oh, it's lifting a butt. It's got an undercut, but I like to just dig. But if I dent too deep, they're not very thick walls, I could go through, so I don't want to dig too much there. But it's nice to do a little bit. And I didn't spray anything on the outside edge of this platter. I was always spraying on the inside, but I'm going to run my tool all the way down just to make sure I don't have any fingerprints from when I was handling it, because my fingers sometimes get slip on them when I'm doing slips. And you can just turn it just to see. It's pretty dry. Now when I'm trimming things that are fairly dry, I use these metal ribs that are just worn out kidney ribs. Do I have a good one? And you can see what it used to look. It used to look like that. Now it looks like that. A lot of use. Let's use this one anyway. Once one of these metal kidney ribs gets worn and has a score, like a scratch on the edge, it always leaves that scratch on your pots as you're throwing, so pretty much they're useless at that point, so I use them as trimming tools. And you can see it pulls the stuff off very quickly. And then using a polishing tool, which is just a pebble off the beach. If you can hear that kind of background noise, that's my heater that's blowing. So you can tell my videos in the winter, they have that kind of background blower noise. Okay, and that's it. That's how you trim a platter. And because we have that undercut, all I do is pick it up, turn it over, take a look at the rim. Sometimes the rim is a little bit uneven, and I even trim the rim a little bit. Let's see what it kind of centered, but I always get back to brown on the rim. That's it. And I can use the straight edge worn out one for this. I don't dig down hard because it could actually move the platter off the spat since nothing is holding it. It always looks nicer when you do the back to the brown because it kind of has that edge like a framing device. Alright, and then feel, when you do stenciling, sometimes you'll have like a really sharp edge where the slip ends, but that's not too bad. And then you can turn it the right way up, just put your hand underneath, all the trimmings will fall down. So it's a good idea, not a stiff hand brush, a gentle brush, just to brush the trimmings off. And there's the platter.